Okay, sports fans, let's roll that beautiful beam footage. Today on my podcast, or whatever you want to call it, I want to talk about one of my favorite groups ever, besides the Beatles. And first, let me throw some names at you. Maybe you can tell me. Paul Kossoff, Andy Frazier, who both of them are no longer here with us, Simon Kirke, and Mr. Paul Rodgers. The group I'm talking about is Free. What a kick-ass group. Those guys were so good at such a young age. Their first album came out in 1968, I believe. And when I listened to it, there were some good songs. The songwriting was great, but there was some really good songs in there. Some I like more than others, but you could see and tell the greatness of the group. Plus, the band, the players. Andy Frazier played bass like nobody else. I mean, he went in another direction. Simon Kirke is one of the greatest all-time rock drummers you could ever want to listen to. In fact, Simon Kirke developed this one thing on the drums that I use a lot, and I have to tell myself sometimes, being a drummer, that I use it too much. But he played the hi-hat continuously, opening and closing it, while he was playing the rest of his beat or all parts of the song. Even when he was just playing the hi-hat, snare, and bass drum, he kept that open and close swish sound on the hi-hat, which makes a nice full sound. The other drummer I know that did that a lot, which is another one of my favorite drummers, is the late Jerry Edmington of Steppenwolf. Now, Simon Kirke was he was just a great rock drummer. You know, he played what needed to be played. Okay, so now Paul Kossoff, the guitar player, he wasn't a flashy guitar player, but he played with soul and feeling. That means a lot. He played with soul and feelings. Loved his playing. And then we have Mr. Paul Rodgers, probably one of the greatest voices in rock music. And some people are going to hate me for saying this, but I really like Brian Howe too. Sorry he got a late start in his career. I wonder what would have happened if he, had started making records at a young age like Paul Rodgers did. But I just got a soft spot in my heart for Brian Howe, even though I must have 50 CDs with Paul Rodgers, whether solo or other projects he was in. But John Mellencamp said it best. He was like the greatest voice in rock, or one of the greatest. I tip my hat off to you, Paul. Now, that group was kicking butt, and they developed a good following in England, but they felt that their music was kind of boring and too slow at one point. But man, if you're going out and playing in front of hundreds of people every night doing your own music, it's just, what a thrill. What a thrill. And of course, to me, the landmark CD, there I go again, sorry, the landmark album was the Fire and Water album. This one right here. Can you see it? Let me move this around. Okay. This was the landmark album that put them on top of the charts. Because if you turn on your TV now, you can still hear commercial jingles using what song? You guys tell me. Of course, All Right Now. Classic rock song. That song stands the test of time. As all 70s music does. That's why I have such a passion on a lot of that 70s music, that which compelled me to start these little podcast sessions, because that music just never dies. You just never get tired of it. It never gets old. And my case in point is they're still playing all right now a song, by the way, that came out in 1970. What is it now? I don't even want to do the math, but you get the idea how long that song has been around. That album, I recommend you to pick up the Fire and Water CD. That's a great place to start on free CDs. I mean, I like the other ones, Tons of Sob, and I forget the other one, the two before that. But that CD is just killer. It's just killer, man. Every song on it, just like the Foghat CD I was talking about. Every song on that CD just kicks butt. And which is kind of funny, because I am doing one of those songs on my new CD. I'm actually doing Don't Say You Love Me by Free from the Fire and Water CD on the CD I'm currently recording right now. I haven't found anybody to sing it yet. Paul, are you free? Give me a hand. But we're working on the music right now over at Two Car Studio. And a point just to say a little bit about my new CD that I'm working on. It's a tribute CD to some of the bands in the 70s that I really loved and really influenced me. This CD has more covers than I have had on any other CD I put out. And I think I have 7 or 8 CDs out now. Like 2 of them are live. But this CD is my tribute. This is like giving back to the artist that inspired me to want to become a musician, songwriter. So I'm actually doing versions of a Spooky Tooth song, which is another one of my favorite groups from the 70s, who I will be talking about, to come. What else do I have on there? Okay, I'm doing Beatles. I'm doing a couple Beatles songs. One actually remade by Spooky Tooth, because seeing the Beatles on TV made me want to become a musician. And I tell this story a lot. Growing up in a house where Motown is what we listen to at home, that was the music. The little parties in our little backyards in the summer with the little tiki lights and stuff, spinning records on the small record player. It was all Motown. That's what we grew up on. And then when I saw the Beatles on TV, I was like, wow, that's it. And the reason I chose to play rock, play more rock when I started my career as a musician, was because I was looking at the financial aspect of it. I was like, the Motown groups usually had 3 or 4 singers. Then they had a 4 or 5-piece backing band. And I was just amazed that the Beatles were singing and playing their own instruments. And I was like, wow, well, that's got to cut down the overhead. I mean, how? That sounds like the way to go. So I had a price to pay for that, which is I can't play funk. Brent Minkle will probably agree to that. But listening to bands like the Mahavishnu Orchestra, King Crimson, some of the progressive rock bands from the 70s that I will be dealing with later on, you can see why. But the funk thing is not my forte as a drummer, my fault. But those groups, those 70 rock bands, just like, they just took me away. And I can't say enough about the Free Fire and Water CD. And just for laughs and giggles, if you listen to that song, you can think of the song that I'm covering on my new CD, Don't Say You Love Me. And the reason I picked that song is because I didn't want to pick songs that everybody, as soon as you hear it, you know it was free. I wanted to dig a little deep, as with the Spooky Tooth song. I wanted to dig a little deep and find stuff that was still just as good that you probably wouldn't know who did it. So that's my take today is Free. What a great group. I'm sorry we lost Andy Frazier and Paul Kossoff, but Simon Kirke and Paul Rodgers resurfaced in Bad Company and continued to kick butt, and they became one of my favorite groups. For a while, I was just like, wow, how can I miss? I mean, I got the drummer for Free and the vocalist, Paul Rodgers, in the same group. But the one thing I have to admit, that Free music just still lives on strong today. I think I remember a quote that Paul Rodgers said on one of his live CDs that I have. I think it was called Paul Rodgers Now or something. He says, I want to do a song about a beautiful band I played in, Free. And I think they did one of the slow songs, Be My Friend. And when he said a beautiful band, he was right, because they were a beautiful four-piece band that kicked butt. So that's another one of the 70s bands that just made me want to become a musician and made me keep this drive alive. And still today, I like playing in a three-piece situation with guitar, bass, and drums and vocals, because it gives you plenty of room and it lets you use your imagination to make it sound full without stepping on everybody else's toes in the situation. So anyway, like I said, that's my podcast for today, talking about the band Free. Go back and get some of their stuff or look them up on YouTube, see how great they were. But my thing I would like to suggest to you today, if nobody's not into it or you're too young, never heard about them besides All Right Now, go pick up that CD, Fire and Water CD, with that tune on there, with all the other great tunes. Not a bad tune on the CD. Some great writing. So, as I get ready to take off from here now, I'm practicing my little thing. My producer's not here, but I'm going to try this. Here's Looking at You. See you next time, guys.